Juan Soto trade is it's like very difficult to build one that either side would take almost. Like, so the other day, so yesterday I was like bored, right? And I just started texting people. I just decided like, all right, I'm gonna build a Dodgers trade, right? Like I'll just see. So I took the top of the Dodgers farm system. Basically, I took their top, took their guys 2 through 4. It was just stupid because whatever. But this is because that the Dodgers already traded Keibert Ruiz to the Nationals, so their top prospects, a catcher, Diego Cartaya. How about this? For this sake, I'll throw Diego Cartaya in there, right? So Diego Cartaya, the two arms, Miller and Pepio. Michael Bush, who's like the number 4 prospect, who's like one of the Dodger conveyor belt guys who's OPSing 900 in the minors. And then I threw in Edwin Rios, who's like a good young controllable corner player. And I said for Juan Soto and Patrick Corbin, because you have to eat the money coming back. And the general response I got from everyone is, "You're an idiot. Leave me alone." Basically, like it doesn't make sense for either side. Basically, because if you're giving up Juan Soto, you have to get the Herschel Walker trade back, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're in a position to make the Herschel Walker trade, why would you do that? Because everyone knows how the Herschel Walker trade went. At this point, right, 3 years of control, it's just like you have to give up so much that it's I don't know. And if you're the Nationals, you have to ask for so much that it's difficult to build one that makes sense.
He's so rare insofar as being in his early 20s and already a legit MVP, a perennial MVP candidate. How can you trade someone like that without getting the Herschel Walker? You can't. And what's the point of having a baseball team if you're not going to keep Juan Soto? Even if he leaves in free agency, you still get that extra last year of Juan Soto that has value. That has value to a franchise. If they make the valiant effort with all the exclusive negotiating time that they have, and they get to the finish line of the World Series ends in 3 years, oh, we couldn't get it done. You still got that extra year of Juan Soto, and you get to turn to your fans and say, we offered him $400 million. We just couldn't get it done. It wasn't the right fit for either one of us. But boy, wasn't all that Juan Soto great? And that's what you're giving up right now. If you're trading him with 3 years left in his deal, that's a lot of Juan Soto. If you're thinking a baseball player's career is 15 years, if he's lucky, you're talking a fifth of the Juan Soto. I think a fifth of Juan Soto sounds delightful. You know, that's what you're giving up. And to get back Cameron Maybin and Adam Miller, maybe, who knows? Like, I don't know. It's a tough sell.
You know, the other part of this, and Andy said it, that this is such an really mostly an intellectual exercise at this point, because when you look at the reality of it, it's so difficult. You know, I don't know if there's enough like suckers in the game to do it. No, like, you know, like for instance, we were looking at that Marlins trade, right? Miggy Cabrera. I mean, check out the names, right? Like for a blockbuster to be that one-sided. I have a hard time envisioning a scenario where, you know, people don't have a good enough read on their own players to have that happen. I just think there's more sophistication in the sport about assigning value in a way that makes sense to you, you know, for each team. Now you can disagree with some of the nuance in that, and that's what makes the difference in how people are valued, obviously. But I think just in general, as a sport, just so much more sophisticated that it's really, really difficult. It's another obstacle as far as pulling off something like this, which, you know, I think Rosenthal called it a dubious baseball idea, and I would tend to agree with that anyway.
Yeah, well, you need several things in order to make this happen, right? You need a very good farm system. You need to have financial resources, financial resources. Sorry for being anti-labor. You need to have an owner willing to spend. Thank you, comrades. Appreciate all of you for listening. You need to have an owner who's willing to spend. You need to, and that's both for Soto and for the theoretical poison pill you might have to take back with him, whether it's, you know, Corbin. I suggested like Steven Strasburg, but the Nationals, I would assume, have insurance on him, and so that's less of a financial burden. Anyway, but theoretically, you eat a bad contract coming back. And you need to have a general manager or a head of baseball operations or an ownership group who's not risk averse. There's not that many places in baseball that check all of those. Like, and so there's teams that have money, there's teams that have a good farm, and there's teams that have sort of crazy GMs, but not many fit all three.
Dude,
And so it's kind, yeah.
No, I'll add one more box. And this is something that I think people get overlooked this a little bit. Even if you had the crazy GM that wasn't risk averse, that person also needs to be able to manage up and convince that owner that, hey, this is something we need to do. And that's not everywhere either. All right. Like that's skill, and it is a skill. Not easy.
But here's the thing, manage up and manage down too, because you need to basically tell your player development people, right? Hey, I know we build all this, we got to give it all up.
Right.
We have to get, this was like a thing that that the Royals, when they were trading for James Shields, that a big issue that, sort of the folks at the top, like Dayton Moore had, was basically selling all the guys on the development side, basically like, we have to do this. Like and the guys on the development side are like, we have put years into, Will Myers. We have put years into, Mike Montgomery, Jake Odorizzi, the other guys in the trade. And so it's like, it's a real skill. You have to be able to convince the people who work for you that their work is valued and we're turning it into this guy. But you also have to convince your owner, like, hey, you're going to have to spend let's say it's for 2 years of Juan Soto, not 3. You're going to have to spend about $55 million, in ARB, maybe more, more than we would be spending, but it's totally worth it because we're getting, a 6-7 win player, this much more at the box office, this much more jerseys sold, all that stuff. But we have to give up a lot. And if it doesn't work, we have made it potentially more difficult to win in year 4. Now, like, these are not arguments that necessarily like fans care about, but for these guys who think in terms of probabilities and how do we keep the window as open for as long as possible, it's I don't know, it's like I said, it's an intellectual exercise because it's just very difficult to actually pull it off if the Nationals are even all that interested in moving him, which they probably shouldn't be until next year.
That's what I kind of wanted to get at before we switch topics, is that I just want to make sure that we're all clear that we know, and the people listening know, why we're talking about trading Juan Soto. It's not because Mike Rizzo came out and said, listen, we're up against the 8 ball, we got to trade Juan Soto. It's not because Juan Soto says, I'd like a trade and I'd like it now. It's because ESPN's Buster Olney wrote a piece. It's titled, Will the Nationals Trade Juan Soto? Could Carlos Correa be on the move? 10 X factors as MLB trade market heats up. And the money quote from the Juan Soto section is, quote, if they're not going to sign him to a long-term deal, then they'll need to trade him, end quote, one evaluator said. The question is when? Like, that's it. That's the rumor, is one evaluator, one unnamed evaluator said, listen, maybe they have to deal him now. Maybe, like, when are they going to do it? It's basically what we do here, and we know nothing. Like, we're the evaluators here. We're talking about trading Juan Soto. It's just bonkers that kind of kernel in a, well-intentioned rumor kind of column has blossomed into this ecosystem of, gosh, everyone's talking about Juan Soto right now.
Well, it's May. There's nothing else to talk about. The games don't matter for several months. But it's a real thing. Like, it's a real thing that the Nationals, I'm sure, assuredly have discussed, and which every front office should be discussing. Now, like, whether it's like a thing, he there, Mike Rizzo's actively making calls, no, but it's true, right? Like, what people, and if you talk to people around the game, like, everyone knows the score with this. They have this guy, this elite player who's going to cost a ton of money several years down the road. The team is effectively in tatters. The big league roster stinks. The farm system's not particularly good. You have a lame duck GM and I believe a lame duck manager, or something where they have options that need to be picked up relatively soon for next year. You have an ownership group considering selling. Like, what do you do with your best asset? So, like, it's a real thing. It's just not grounded in like concrete negotiations as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, all the conditions exist, right? Like instability. That's one. It's instability, and also it's a tribute to how great a player this guy is, frankly. Just that, there's only one of Juan Soto, and if all around him you've got this instability, I think naturally from that flow these conversations, and what's quote unquote real depends on who you ask sometimes, right? Like I think Andy said it, and he's right, man. Like if you're a front office in the sport that hasn't at least like had a conversation about this possibility, then probably doing it wrong. So I don't know what real means, but certainly feels like it's real enough. And so here we are chatting about it.
It's one of those things, like I don't think like Billy Epler would be someone who like want to talk about this, but I always thought it'd be like a fun story idea, back when he was GM of the Angels and before they signed Trout to a long-term deal, to just be like, all right, what's the dumbest offer you've gotten for Trout? Like, what's the dumbest approach has anyone called and offered like one prospect, like what, and it's because it's that there's that old, I don't know the exact details and I just, whatever. There's like a famous story between two execs where they're sort of texting about an offer, and a guy, offers like a C-level prospect for an A-level pending free agent, and the other GM responds like, come on, man. And the second GM writes back like, LOL, had to try. Like, yeah, you gotta ask, right?
It happens more now because so much of their interactions are on text.
Yeah.
And so what they'll get back, I think Brian Cashman has said this before, like it's a parlor game for him to figure out what like animated GIF to send back.
Yeah.
Like some version like a middle finger or whatever, but more clever than that. So yeah, like it's just even the way they communicate just makes it easier to do that. Why not?
Yeah.
There's an old David Cross bit that I'm not going to repeat in its entirety because it's a little vulgar, but it's talking about the people who are taking the trash away and they're catcalling the women walking by. And the gist of it is like 99% of them, they keep walking, but maybe that 100th, so why wouldn't you just, I will say before moving on, because I know this will hit home with Mark, I can think of another player in that Juan Soto, Miguel Cabrera tier, young, Ricky Henderson. How did that affect your childhood when Ricky Henderson was traded?
So that was early for me. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I was into it when Ricky came back.
Okay.
So that was cool. There you
Look
go.
At that. Howard Bryant. Have you gotten into the Howard Bryant, Ricky Henderson biography?
It's next. It's next in the list.
That was my dude growing up. I had the bright yellow fluorescent Mizuno gloves, and I wasn't fast at all, but I would crouch down every time I got on base. So that was my guy. That was big news.